Strike hard, strike first, no mercy. Hey, welcome to another episode of GeekOutdoors.com. If you remember that line, then you remember Karate Kid and this iconic scene right here between Daniel-san and Johnny Lawrence. And you also remember how wonderful this movie was and the sequel, Karate Kid 2. And there have been many other movies after that, but for myself, it was Karate Kid 1 and 2. I absolutely love those movies, especially the relationship between Daniel-san and Mr. Miyagi and all the lessons that it taught. But in Karate Kid 1, the one character that I will never forget is this guy right here, Johnny Lawrence of Cobra Kai. He was probably one of the most memorable villains that I can remember, but also he was a character that you actually kind of loved, you know, in a really weird way, because in the end, you find out that he congratulates Daniel-san on the victory, and even in the follow-up Karate Kid 2, you learn a little bit more about John Kreese and what type of person he really is. So that's something that will always stick with me. I never really watched any of the other Karate Kids after that. I think the last one that I kind of saw was the one with Hilary Swank. And after that, I just pretty much stopped watching it. I didn't even watch the remake in 2010. So when I heard about Cobra Kai coming out, and especially on YouTube Red, as an entire 10-episode series, I was like, okay, kind of interested, because it had the original actors who played Daniel-san and Johnny Lawrence, Ralph Macchio and William Zabka. And of course, the late Mr. Miyagi could not be in this movie, Pat Morita, because he passed away a while back. Anyway, let's just say I was skeptical, because it looked like it was going to be playing off nostalgia. And then from the trailers, it looks like it was just going to twist it around. Instead of it being all about Daniel-san, it was going to be about Johnny Lawrence. But now, after seeing the entire season, this is fantastic. It's my favorite series of this entire year, and probably one of the best that I've seen, even up there with Stranger Things. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy, but let me go ahead and explain why. Now, this actual review I'm doing, this is going to be a non-spoilers. And maybe later I will do spoilers, but I do want to give a chance for people to actually watch and enjoy this. I'm going to come right out and say the best part of this series is that guy right there, Johnny Lawrence, William Zabka. And what this particular series does so well is it fleshes out this guy. It fleshes out this bad boy, you know, of the very first movie. But it also even grows Cobra Kai as its own character in a lot of ways. And what this does so well is that it takes these two central characters that we all know and love, Daniel-san, Johnny Lawrence, and it makes them more humans. You know, it makes them realistic people. And the fact that this followed 34 years after the events of the first movie, and it continues everything pretty much as it would happen in real life, I was really impressed by that. And the acting, William Zabka's performance, it's excellent. Absolutely excellent. I was so surprised by this show. So, trying not to have too many spoilers, in general, what happens is Johnny Lawrence is now a washout. He even has his same car from the very first movie. You know, it's like he never left the 80s. And that is actually also another central theme on here, that there is a difference between the different time periods, the 80s and in the modern age. And also the fact that Johnny Lawrence, he really truly never left the 80s. And you see throughout most of this series, there's so many jokes. There's so many like funny generational things that people who were not born in the 80s or lived in the 80s will probably not understand. And such things as, you know, Johnny Lawrence just being really mean to people. He's still an a-hole, you know. Also, type of references that there are right here in this movie. But even like little jokes, like Johnny Lawrence asking, "What's a Facebook?" You know, all those little things peppered out throughout the show make it extremely funny. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that I really enjoyed about this actual entire series, I really see it as like one long movie, is that it uses nostalgia in the way that should be done. You know, very much like Stranger Things is. There's a lot of 80s music. If you love Guns N' Roses and Rat, you will like this here. But also at the same time, it uses nostalgia in a way that serves the story. There are many callbacks to the original movie. There's actually scenes from the original movie, but it doesn't do it in a very cheap way like, hey, you remember this. It does it in a way like, okay, this is why the characters are the way they are. And with Johnny Lawrence's character, it's all about pretty much him. Okay, now definitely Johnny Lawrence and Daniel San, they have a history here. And the movie smartly continues that, and how both of these men grow and also they fail in their own ways, which is an extremely different dynamic that I thoroughly enjoyed. And so going back to the whole nostalgia thing, since the creators of this show knew that people actually had a lot of nostalgia and love for the original series, they used the callbacks in a way that made sense. They used the callbacks in a way that strengthened these characters. You find out a lot why Johnny Lawrence is the way that he is, which you never really knew about before, even though you saw small glimpses of that at the end of Karate Kid 1 and then at the beginning of Karate Kid 2. You understand the relationship that could have been, okay, and because of the losses of these relationships, how they affected them much later on, especially Johnny Lawrence's character. And then it's just not about them. Of course, there is a new generation. There's Miguel, there's Sam, there's Aisha, there's Hawk, there's Robbie. You learn all these characters. And another surprising thing was how the movie focused so much on this family element. You know, not only their families, like Daniel-san has a family of his own, but also the family of characters around. You know, it's like an 80s high school movie as well. So there's the stereotypical mean girls, there are the bullies, okay, which Johnny Lawrence was back then, and all those other things. And then as you're watching the show, you can't stop watching it. That's what I really enjoyed about it. I was so surprised. You wanted to know what's going to go on next. And then midway through, whenever Cobra Kai gets start back up, it's like, it doesn't like go into a transition, in other words. You know, things that you think are going to happen, they don't. You know, and like Johnny Lawrence, he's having a really tough life. You know, and as you go along, you're like, man, is this guy ever going to get a break? You feel bad for him. You feel even worse when you find out how he turned out the way he did. And in some parts, I actually thought Daniel LaRusso, he became the jerk. You know, and so it's really hard to explain that without seeing that. And then as you go much later on, you find out that the relationships that they have, it kind of comes back full circle. And in a lot of cases, it does mimic Karate Kid 1, especially when you think about Miguel and Robbie, and you'll kind of get what I mean. But even Sam as well. And so there is like a complete representation of the very first movie. And so even though some of these things are familiar, they do it in a way that, once again, I think is very respectful. And it's kind of hard for me not to leave spoilers. And so let's just say that by the end of the movie, you really grow to love Johnny Lawrence, you know, but you also learn to love Ralph Macchio, so Daniel-san again. And there's even some very special homages in this particular series that you all know and love. And even at the end, the characters themselves, they grow. You know, they realize some of the mistakes that they made, but also a lot of things that they learn. And also at the same time, Cobra Kai, man, the whole idea of this school coming back, it was kind of like a resurgence of this movie as well. There's so many things here. And it went from like just another Karate Kid, possibly a ripoff or a rehash, to something that grew very much like the characters of this movie. And by the end, I wanted to be in Cobra Kai. You know, with the final battles, it's reminded me of Karate Kid 1. And there's even references to some moves from Karate Kid 1. But once again, it never does it in a cheap way. This is a series that I was surprised with. It actually made me get a YouTube Red account. And it also made me get really nostalgic in a good way. It reminded me a lot of why I enjoyed Karate Kid 1 so much, and also Karate Kid 2. The actors and actresses in the show did a great job, especially once again, William Zabka as Johnny Lawrence. I never thought that I would see these characters again, but I'm so happy that they did, and also that they did it in the right way. Okay, so if you have not seen this series, I highly recommend you watch it. And even if you can, just watch the very first few episodes. I think at the time that I did the video, the first 2 episodes were actually free. But after that, you actually want to watch the rest of it. Okay, so go check it out. I highly, highly recommend this series. It is my favorite series of the year. And it is a series that I will go back to time and time again. And also, there is a really great surprise at the end of this series as well. And so just kind of stick around throughout the entire series. And so that's it for this episode and this review of Cobra Kai Season 1. If you have not seen it, as I said earlier, I would recommend you go watch it. And if you do have the original Karate Kid 1 available for you to watch, I'd recommend you watch that as well. So then by the time you get to this, it's kind of like an absolute sequel. It's right after that movie in a lot of ways, 34 years later. And so if you had any thoughts on this, whether it is this new Cobra Kai series or any of the previous Karate Kid movies, be sure to leave that in the comments area below. And as always, if you did get value out of these videos, be sure to subscribe. And if you wanted to support my channel further, you could do that at patreon.com/Geek Outdoors. Thanks for checking out this episode. And as always, if you like these videos, be sure to click on the subscribe button. And for full written content, audio content, and additional geek stuff, head over to geekoutdoors.com, and I'll see you outdoors on the very next episode.